now that you're here, we might as well catch up. Hello. Oh, that was my earring, not the hot chocolate, weirdly. 1 minute. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. It has been 4 months since I quit my full-time job as a doctor, and still, even as I say that, there are alarm bells ringing in my head like, what are you doing? You literally worked so hard for the pleasure of working this very specific career and I've chosen not to, so let's talk about that. I feel like most things in life follow the whole grass is greener rhetoric, where whatever you're doing doesn't seem as desirable or exciting as what the other side is doing. And from my experience, both sides of the metaphorical fence are usually thinking the same about the other side. So I think it's worth having conversations about both sides of the story. And I just like thinking out loud and talking to you guys about the journey, and it allows me to put off getting actual therapy for a little bit longer, so let's just keep going. Bit of background about me. So I qualified as a doctor around 3 years ago, and I did 2 years of the foundation program, which is the first 2 years of your training. Then instead of applying for specialty training as you can do at that stage, I sidestepped off the career progression ladder and did a non-training job in Australia. And after about a year of that, I sidestepped off the career ladder even more and have actually not decided to go for any job this year, be it training or non-training, and so I'm currently unemployed from full-time work. I have been doing ad hoc locum shifts along the way to earn some money and be able to afford hot chocolates, but largely I have been pretty unemployed from full-time work. So if you've ever heard anyone talk about a career path in medicine, you know it's often described as a sort of conveyor belt analogy, in that it's a very linear, well-trodden, predefined, almost self-moving career path that kind of drags you along with it. It doesn't mean it's a totally passive effort from yourself, like you have to keep your competencies up, keep your portfolio competitive, and be doing interviews and exams along the way to make sure that you can progress to the next step. But what the next step is very clearly defined. So the conveyor belt looks something like graduating from medical school, doing your 2 years of foundation training, then applying for specialty training and being a specialty trainee for however many years that program is, and then ending up as a consultant on the other end. I left that conveyor belt about 1.5 years ago now, and with every passing day that gap is getting longer and longer. And sometimes I just think about it like, what are you doing? I think this is why I love being in Australia so much, because obviously I was surrounded by lots of other UK trained doctors who had stepped off the career path, so it felt like you were kind of doing what everyone else is doing. But regardless, I still want to be a surgeon, and progression in surgery particularly, I think it's really easy to see. It's very easy to see what progression looks like when you're working with colleagues who have been training for a few years in that speciality, and they're independently doing things in theatre and very tangibly and visibly upskilling. And I'm watching them like, but I want that, and I chose not to go and get it. So that's a bit confusing. It's a bit of a conundrum to battle with sometimes. All systems are out of touch. When you're employed in a healthcare system, as I've mentioned, there are lots of systems and predefined pathways in place, and when you're in that system, you're very much aware of how things are working, when deadlines are opening, when things are changing, because you're very much embedded in that system, and so you absorb all this information around you because you're working with your colleagues who are talking about it all the time. So initially I left the NHS, but I was still practicing full-time medicine in Australia. But now that I'm not really doing that or working in the NHS, there is a lot of distance and time between me and the system here in the UK. This has been pretty apparent on 3 occasions. With UK surgical training, there are 2 methods of infiltrating the training pathways. One is the normal surgical training that pretty much anyone who wants to do surgery has to apply for, and the other is the academic surgical training pathway, where there's obviously more of a focus on research, academia generally, and that is a separate method of application. It has a very different application process, it has very different deadlines which are much earlier than the normal surgical training pathway. Now, something that might be a little bit surprising is that there's no kind of announcement when things are opening and closing. No one really tells you what's going on. It's more just from word of mouth of everyone around you. With the academic training pathway opening so much earlier than the normal pathway, and not really being around anyone who was talking about it, I actually didn't discover that it opened till very late, and it resulted in a very stressful, intense couple of days where we were hurrying to put an application together. That's a lot better than what happened last year when I didn't even realize the normal surgical training application window had opened and closed until after it had closed, and then I was like, well, guess I'm not applying for training then. And it's not a problem. I mean, none of the things I'm talking about in this video are problems at all. You can just be proactive and look up when these things are happening, but it's hard to explain when you're not in the system. You're just not as aware of the timeframes and periods of time when things should be opening and you should be starting to think about applications. You're just not really in that frame of mind yourself. Secondly, when I did get around to filling out these application forms, I realized that I needed quite a few references. I think I needed 3 consultant references. And again, when you're working, when you're in the system, that's not a problem. You ask your assigned supervisors, consultants you are currently working with or have worked with for a good period of time. But when you don't have a regular team, rotations, supervisors, and you're very much on your own, it can be a little difficult. I just remember very awkwardly emailing consultants I'd worked with months and months ago, even as far back as when I was last in the UK, almost 2 years ago, because that was the last consultant who'd supervised me for a proper research project, and so was the best person to be my academic supervisor. Now, there were no dramas ultimately. Everyone replied. They were really, really nice and more than happy to be references, but I just felt like the longer that gap is between now and when you last worked with people that you need to be your references, it feels like you're kind of dragging them back from before. And the longer that gap becomes, the further you're dragging them back. Thirdly, I'm currently revising for the wonderful exam that is the MSRA. I was wondering if I should talk a little bit more about the MSRA, but it makes me too sad to even go down that path, so I'm not going to. Essentially, it is an exam for applying to many different specialities in the UK, and that's what I'm preparing for now. So when I was in medical school and working in the UK, you've learned a certain set of guidelines for how to deal with common presentations, which medications to give, which kind of treatment plans to follow. And yes, those are slightly changing, but you kind of pick it up as you're working. Now that I've been out the system for a couple of years and I've come back to do these questions, which are based on UK guidelines, suddenly everything has changed. As I'm doing these questions, I'm answering them from what I know and from what I learnt, and then I'm so shocked when it's wrong because I know that's what I used to know. And it turns out all the guidelines have changed and I'm completely unaware of them because I haven't been working in a UK system for so long. It's really made me appreciate how hard it must be for international graduates to sit these exams, which are so heavily based on UK guidelines specifically, because I'm suddenly feeling like such an outsider with my medical knowledge, which is such a weird feeling when you've trained here and learned everything from here in the first place. Don't take me back, cause I'm having such a good time. I'm having a ball. Sorry, not sorry. Okay, so this is the part where it's gonna get pretty real. It's been 4 months, as I may have mentioned, of not working as a full-time doctor, and I don't miss it at all. Now, this isn't as bleak or as dramatic as I think it sounds. I've been reasoning with these feelings for a while, and I think there's a few things going on. Firstly, I think it's important to look at the type of work I'm doing. It's not as simple as just saying I am a doctor. The kind of work that I can do is the work that I have been trained to do and that I have the relevant competencies signed off to do. That is what is safe, not only for the patients, but also for myself, to make sure I'm not putting myself in any compromising situations where I'm stepping up and taking more responsibility than I'm qualified to do. Now, since I haven't been progressing on any training programs, I'm kind of stuck at a level of doctoring that I have been at for a couple of years now. That's not to say I haven't learned anything. Of course, there is always learning going on in the background. You develop more confidence and more competence just by experience, but essentially I'm not doing the kind of work that I want to be doing, in that I'm not getting trained surgically, I'm not having surgical competencies signed off, and for me to be able to own them and do them more independently and basically do everything that I want to be doing on a surgical training program. So maybe the reason I just don't look forward to stepping into a hospital anymore is I know the type of work I'll be doing is not the stuff that will be stimulating me and what I want from my professional life. And so the hope is that when I am on a training pathway, I will enjoy it more. Now, speaking to other doctors who have progressed and are on training programs, they do seem to be enjoying it a lot, in surgery specifically. And yes, there are all the trials and tribulations that come with working as a doctor, with working in the NHS. I know it's not easy right now. On the whole, they are enjoying stepping up and getting stuck into surgery, so there is some hope on the horizon. Now, like I mentioned, the reason I'm doing locum shifts this year is because I need money. I need money like we all do for survival and for certain big expenses I've got this year. It's a big year and savings alone will not cut it at all for me, so I gotta make that cash. The thing with a medical career, whether you're working full-time or locum shifts like I am now, is you are directly exchanging your time for money. And I find that when I am doing a run of shifts, there's literally not any time for anything else. I know people manage to fit lots of things in with a full-time job. It's not impossible by any means. At the same time, it's not the flexible and multifaceted life that I want to be living. And yet I must work all of those hours because I need that money. And of course that brews resentment. Something I think is talked about a lot now that we probably all know is the importance of having multiple streams of income, so you're not relying on any one thing for money, and in my opinion makes you enjoy those things more because you know that the sole reason you're doing that job is not just to pay the bills. It is actually a little bit that you actually want to, because there are other ways you could be earning money as well, and that just gives it a little bit of edge of enjoyment. So what do multiple streams of income look like for me? Well, in my opinion, I don't think it's compatible with a full-time job in medicine. I definitely think some hours need to be dropped to open up more hours for other streams to be developed. Career routes that are very well established in the part-time world, things like general practice, obstetrics and gynecology, pediatrics, there is a bit more of a part-time culture there. With surgery, it is coming, it is talked about more than it ever has been before, but it's by no means particularly well established and will not be easy to achieve from what I'm hearing. But hypothetically, going down that route will free up some hours, I hope, to be working on my other streams of income from things like this. I haven't really talked much about the money side of this content creation thing, and as you all know, I've not really been treating it like a job with consistent uploading schedules or having a sort of business mindset around this whole thing. But even so, it could be a financially viable option to serve as another stream of income. Would it allow me to leave medicine with a greater degree of flexibility and more wealth, both in the forms of time and money? Possibly. And that leads me on to my next conundrum. The guilt trip. Being in medicine is a weird enough experience. There are the body fluids that you have to see and handle, and then there are the incredibly vulnerable moments that you somehow get to be a part of when people are dealing with some of the most difficult things in their lives. On top of all of that, there are also a lot of opinions pressed upon you. Assumptions are made that you shouldn't care about the working conditions or the money because, hey, you're doing the job of the people and you are running it on goodwill. Now, I'm not in agreement with this narrative at all. I believe you should have good and safe working conditions and that you should be paid in accordance to the level of risk and responsibility that your job has, as well as the personal sacrifices of time and a lot of money that goes into doing this kind of job. Despite this, there is this constant background rumbling guilt that, yes, I do have a massive student loan debt on my head, which I have to pay back for the pleasure of training as a doctor. But of course, there have been a lot of other resources poured into my training, all of the time that so many mentors and doctors have given me to be able to train me and teach me so that I can go on and use those skills to have a very specific career as a doctor. But you know, put all of that aside and just think, okay, that's fine, it's a temporary break, I'm just figuring it out and then I will be back. And then I think it's important to talk about what those options will be. Either I come back to full-time work, or I do part-time work as a doctor and supplement my income with other streams, or I just leave completely. And that brings me to my last point of purpose. Purpose is a weird one. I think there's almost a fixation that we should be able to clearly define very specifically what our purpose is.
Why is it that we talk so much about passion and purpose? It's because they have such incredible benefits in our life.
I think there is merit in this way of thinking. I think you should think of yourself as part of a very big world and think about what you can kind of give back, what value you can bring. I believe that purpose can be changing with different periods of your life, that everyone's purpose can be on completely different scales, and that there shouldn't be any hierarchy of one purpose being better or more noble than another. Yet, when I think about leaving medicine, even just part-time, to pursue other things to make a living, like this content creation stuff, I just can't help but think that I am leaving a better purpose for one that's just not as meaningful. And again, I'm not saying that one is better and one is worse. I'm literally just thinking out loud about the things and the niggles that lie in my mind, and maybe lie in other people's minds as well when they're at crossroads like this. I read something really helpful the other day, which was along the lines of, it is easier to figure out what you don't want than what you do want. So that's just about what I'm doing right now. There are a lot of unknowns. I'm currently applying for surgery in the UK, and questions like, will I get a job? If I do, will I hate it? Will I be able to make a flexible part-time career work in surgery? Is the role of content creation still on the hobby side or more of a career side? I don't know. I think all we can do is figure out our values, figure out what the life we want should look like, and then figure out how to get there within that value system. And that is what the journey ahead holds. Being in this career limbo and trying to figure out my next steps can be pretty daunting, especially for someone like me who likes having every single thing planned out. But there has been a guiding light throughout all of this, and yes, it is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform where you can learn all sorts of creative skills from any one of their thousands of classes. You've heard me speak about all the creative classes that Skillshare have, but did you know they've got hundreds of career-focused classes too? Classes that help you explore your career options, work on your personal growth, and take control in designing the life that you want to lead. I recently took this class on growing your social following into a creative business by Kate Aarons, which was so helpful to just allow me the time to reflect on this whole creativity thing and make me think about it more like a sustainable and achievable business, which could give me more freedom and enjoyment from my career in medicine in the future. The best thing is that you can explore all of these classes for free because Skillshare have kindly given me a link in the description box below to get a 7-day free trial and then 20% off your first year subscription. Thinking about your future can be daunting, but the beginning of the year is the perfect time to reflect on your goals and build some good action plans for the future, like I'm trying to do now. So I really hope you give Skillshare a go and that you love their classes as much as I do. Okay, that's everything from me today. The sun has gone down, my hot chocolate has definitely become cold. That's not bad actually. And it is time for me to go. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.